What's poppin', y'all? One of the biggest, richest, yet most relatable streamers, at least to his audience, Asmongold, has talked about how he believes that there's a streamer bubble right now and he doesn't know how sustainable it is. So I'm gonna play you guys the clip first, and I think he brings up a lot of interesting points that we need to address. So we're gonna play it first.
I don't really criticize a lot of the, subathon or stuff like that, but I do think that at a certain point, there's a lot of, I think, resentment that builds up with audiences when people continuously do events where they're just asking their viewers for money. And I think that there are exceptions for this. Like, one thing is that, Ludwig, for example, Ludwig did an event and it was a charity event. I thought it did pretty well. I watched a good amount of it because this was back whenever I was still off stream. And so, he did a great event. And I think, asking and begging for money for charity is a very different dynamic than, asking for it for yourself. And so with Twitch, whenever you have these people that live in these, multi-million-dollar mansions, they are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and they're making all this money, they're doing all this stuff, and somehow at the same time, they're asking their viewers, who are oftentimes teenagers or young adults, for, $5 all the time. It just rubs a lot of people the wrong way, I think. I think it does. I think it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. And I think that there is a growing resentment for that. And I don't know really how long that's going to last. I have no idea. But I certainly think that it's there.
So off rip, there is something to be said about subathon. It used to be, and I talked about this in a previous video I did where I titled it Kai Cenat Ruined the Subathon. But a subathon was something that was asked for a lot of times by the audience. And now it's kind of like, oh, this is a standard thing that we have to do. And it is a revenue generator. And people do it to generate revenue, to generate a lot of money. But I agree with Asmongold in the sense that people getting up there and just asking for money when they are displaying untold levels of wealth, it is going to rub people the wrong way, especially as wealth inequality continues to, is the right term, skyrocket. Wealth inequality continues to grow. Let's just say that. The animosity that people have for really rich people right now is a lot higher than it was even 5 years ago, let alone 7 years ago. And then you also have to take into consideration newer demographics that are being brought into streaming. And this is something that, for instance, PC gaming, right? For the majority of people, PC gaming was kind of gatekept, and that's where a lot of Twitch streamers got on. For example, Asmongold, he got on via World of Warcraft. There was a lot of World of Warcraft streamers. Some of the biggest streamers initially came from World of Warcraft, whether that was a Rekful, who I believe was the first person to integrate or figure out donations on stream, who he passed away, unfortunately. Who else? Asmongold, Soda Poppin', who else? Other people came into the game after that. I think even Mizkif was a fan of World of Warcraft streamers, and he got into streaming via that as well. But a lot of it was PC gaming, and PC gaming, it's a lot. Building a PC, having a gaming PC was an indicator of a certain level of wealth, especially pre-2016. You had to be at least middle class, if not upper middle class, because a PC would have costed $1,000, maybe even more. I remember I had a PC that costed, I don't know, $400 something bucks, and it couldn't even run. There was no way it could run World of Warcraft. Not that I even had any intention of playing that. It could barely, like Wizard 101, these lower end games, which I never played. I think Toontown I played maybe, but the computer could barely run that. So there was already an audience that came into it, and console gaming like Xbox, PS, those were a lot more accessible and a lot cheaper. Granted, a PS3 was $600, but it was cheaper than a gaming PC. And also a lot of the time it was building a gaming PC was cheaper than buying a pre-assembled one. But a lot of the time people didn't really know, especially if you come below a certain line of income, your family comes before a certain line of income, you weren't even thinking about a gaming PC. You got to keep in mind, this is not pre-internet, but let's just say from the years 2000 to 2014, 15. A gaming PC was like, it was a niche thing. My point is, people that come from a middle class or upper background that don't really have to worry about money and don't have to pinch pennies or anything like that, it creates an environment where they have an excess of income. They are not cheap, if you want to call it that, which I don't think is the right word. So they can be like, oh, let me throw this streamer $5. Let me throw this streamer $10. And it was never seen as mandatory. It was never encouraged. It was always just there. And that's one thing that I really, really liked about Twitch up until, let's say, 2020, is that there was such a level of generosity where people wanted to support the streamer financially, where they're like, yo, this person makes great stuff. Let me give them my appreciation with like $5, $10. It shows up on screen. They read out the message, and people got creative with this, and they started to maybe like have TTS on, etc. We're not going to go that far. But I feel like when certain like streamers came into the game and they had demographics or audiences that were very young, right? Like they were, keep in mind, like PC gaming, it was for the most part, especially during the time period that I said, it was like 16 plus. Now you're getting kids as young as 8 watching streamers, 8 to 18 that don't have any money, whose parents may not even have any money. And now that's a new viewer base that's being added to Twitch that wasn't there before. Yeah, there's not going to be as much disposable income thrown at certain streamers, and especially in the way that these streamers are attracting that audience. So what content are they doing? They're doing girl content, they are doing money content, they're doing flexing content. You're going to attract a certain type of audience with that, as opposed to what Twitch was for the majority of its existence, just gaming. That's going to attract a different type of audience. And even like Fortnite, right? Like Fortnite was, I would say, a newer age thing from like 2017, 18 plus, but people were generous on Fortnite too. It was a game, and it didn't feel like the streamer had this unattainable lifestyle. It was just like, hey, this guy's just like me. Like, I think one of the best examples of that has always been Tfue, where it's like, yo, this guy, he's just like a college, I could see how any college bro is like, yo, this guy's just like us, but he's, he's killing it at this game, but he's also like a surfer. I don't know if he surfs, but he's like a beach kid, and he skateboards, and he does these cool stunts, and like, yeah, let me throw him some bread. He's a cool guy. But I think there is a demand that's growing of streamers that need the money because they're also investing so much more. And I don't think Asmongold addressed this. The expectation, and I think they self-created this expectation, the streamers amongst themselves, maybe not intentionally, but when you're throwing huge events, like for instance, you realize how having a cameraman is a normal thing now? It's like, oh, the starter kit to being a streamer is you have a clipping team and you have a cameraman. That was never, the idea of a cameraman was bizarre to me. Like if you talk about like OG IRL streamer, right? Ice Poseidon. This guy walked around with such a crazy contraption, but even the IRL streamers that he birthed, they came from like a selfie stick. They're just IRL streaming with a selfie stick. It felt authentic. It was kind of like a vlog, but now there's cameramen following people. That's already a cost. You got to have hotel costs for that person wherever you're going. You got to have food costs for that person, and you got to pay that person for their time. So that's an extra expense. And even back then, if you watch the interview that Ice Poseidon did with No Jumper, with Adam 22, he talks about the expenses that he had. I think at that point in time, he was making around $20,000 a month via donations, as well as I think like subscriptions, things like that, and ads. But he was saying that he was spending at least $10,000, if not more, a month, whether it was stuff breaking, equipment, travel expenses, etc. So his cost for IRL streaming was higher than the desktop streamers. So a lot of people, they're like, well, this is why a lot of people didn't get into IRL. They thought, well, why would I get into IRL if I'm safer, I'm making more money at home, and I have less cost? But now a lot of these streamers got into it, and I think this is why gambling and sponsors like that have become so prevalent, because there is such a high cost of upkeep now for these streamers and there's an expectation now that they created. So people want to see, like, you got Neon doing a live stream in Turks with a bunch of black cars and security and a cameraman and then a clipping team and then a person running his YouTube, and this is a whole operation that could not be sustained just by the generosity of the audience, if they're even generous. And you notice this too with different audiences. Like I remember the first time I saw Flight streaming, and he had about 9,000 viewers, and this is years ago, maybe 4 years ago or so, maybe 5. And at this time, I had seen a lot of different streamers, right? And in a different side of Twitch. And I see Flight, and I'm looking through the chat. The chat's moving, and I see like 1 or 2 sub badges. I'm like, yo, what? this guy, he's not getting anybody donating to him. He's got 1 or 2 sub badges. And granted, a lot of his audience came from YouTube, or maybe they were watching via console or something like that. But I remember thinking that was quite bizarre. But if you have an audience like that, then you need to rely on sponsors because their generosity is not enough to keep you afloat. And I think people are a lot less likely to be generous if they feel like you're flaunting it or you don't need it. The whole I'm not donating to a millionaire concept, which I completely disagree with. Like, if I like a product, whether it's an entertainment is a product, and I feel like person put effort into it, I am going to show my appreciation. I'll throw a couple of bucks at it. I just feel like I can't just get free, which people have been conditioned to by these major platforms. Even though it's not really free, you're paying with your time, which is ads. You're getting played ads. That's why I'll always pay to not have ads. But when you see an individual like an Asmongold or even a Moist Critical, who we'll talk about in a different video, or an XQC's just changed recently to start buying really expensive things. And I wouldn't say he flexes on his audience, but he's enjoying his bread a little bit more now. But for years, if you ran the numbers, you would realize that XQC was worth north of 10 million 6+ years ago. Easily. But what did he do? The guy woke up, the guy's room was a mess. He would like barely eat. He would never go outside. He was just on stream all day in like a regular house, what it looked like a regular house. So people get this feeling of this guy's just like me, we're kicking it. Yeah, I'll throw him $10. Yeah, I'll sub to him. Like, I've been subbed to XQC for maybe 7 years. I don't even know. What's like 100 months? Something like that. And Asmongold is the same thing, except an even worse version. Like, they're like, this guy's filthy rich. Like, this guy's richer than DDG. Asmongold is richer than DDG by far. Like, it's so much richer than DDG. But this guy's got roaches in his room, and he was still living with his parents. Granted, he was living with his mom, and I think both his mom and dad passed away, sadly. His dad recently passed away, but he was taking care of his parents for a long period of time in his life, which didn't excuse how filthy his room was. It became a meme that his room was so filthy, and there was even like roaches walking on top of his like shirt one time, and he didn't notice it. But this is an example of, oh yeah, you want to contribute to this guy, not because you think he's broke, but because even though he's filthy rich, he's not flexing it. And not even is he not flexing it, you're like, damn, I live in better conditions than this guy. But why I think this is going to implode, to add on to what Asmongold is saying, is like, for example, you've got a FaZe, and FaZe is 51% owned by the owner or co-founder of DraftKings. And that person pays for the house, and that person pays for the production team, and that person pays for a lot of things that allows them to live there. And apparently that person doesn't take a percentage from any of the streamers. So you start to think about this just from a business perspective. Where is the profitability coming from? Like, yeah, there's ads that run for the streamer, but the streamer gets that. And I think like there's a lot of money flowing in here, and this is why gambling is what sustained this for a lot of time. Like, for example, Aiden Ross, without a stake or a rain bet or whatever other sponsor he has that is gambling related that's going to give you this type of money, he would not be able to throw these events. It's impossible. He said he spent $90,000 on a production team. He had to fly in every single fighter. Every single fighter gets paid a certain amount. Then you have the security. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you were just running that on Twitch, you're not making that money back. The finances don't add up. This is why you need somebody that's going to throw a crazy amount of money, like these gambling sponsors, or you're in a situation where these streamers, like for example FaZe, they can just run up a bag. Kai Cenat, I think, is somebody that is doing it with as cleanly as possible, if you want to call it that, but he's spending a lot of money. Kai Cenat is reinvesting a ton of money. Like, yeah, he has sponsors helping him, but he's throwing his own money to book a lot of these people that showed up to his Mafiathon. And if you believe that, oh yeah, all these celebrity guests just hopped on Kai Cenat's stream for some promotion for free, then listen, I don't even know. I don't even know how I could convince you otherwise. So I do think this is a bubble where let's not even get started on the Clippers. So a lot of streamers are paying a ton of money to Clippers, but their viewership is not growing in proportion to the amount of money that they're spending on Clippers. So there's a bleeding that's happening. And eventually, I think this is all going to fall apart. Not the streaming industry as a whole, but these streamers that think that they can make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. The only way that it's going to be bigger and bigger is with someone outside throwing a lot of money. And this is where streaming kind of feels like it's getting away from what it was, which is the streamer and the audience, not the streamer and this corporate sponsor that's just going to throw a ton of money at them for whatever reason. Well, like for FaZe, for instance, they just believe like the brand of FaZe is worth a lot, which I think there's a case to be made there. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you ever donated money to a streamer? I have, to a ton. There's different reasons for each one. Some I just think it's funny to throw up a funny message. Some I'm like, yo, this was great entertainment. But if you haven't and you have the money to do so, why didn't you? I guess that's that's the best way I can phrase the question. Yeah, let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you enjoyed. And I'm gonna see y'all in the next one.